Proverbs 17. Proverbs 17. Proverbs. It's your last roast beef roll. All right. We're in 17. We are starting in verse 18, I think. We got kind of in mania race. We were stuck in the middle, and
not a lot of skill involved.
We're in Proverbs 17, verse 19. I will do a refresher. For those of you in the back, you are welcome to stay on the premises. Just if you can maybe go to the narthex or the parking lot. Not to kick you out. Y'all are too nice to each other.
You know, I think I told you the last time that
You love each other.
I was a little surprised by what I saw here.
That's for the sermon. I've done my own grace. I'm going to read those verses we read last week, and you can pay attention as we go forward.
Just a Republican.
Can you close that door from the narthex? Thank you. Speaking of my great grandfather, he used to say, "Aren't they just like chickens?" I didn't ask. Something about grandfathers and great grandfathers, you know, they'll say whatever that is there. Where's the same people who wait in the mall, right? They earn their stripes, they get the right thing. All right, I'll read verses 19 through 21, which we read last week. He that loveth transgression, that loveth strife, he that exalteth his gates seeketh destruction. He that hath a froward heart findeth no good, he that has a perverse tongue falleth into mischief. He that begetteth a fool doeth it to his own sorrow, and the father of a fool hath no joy.
She goes back 3.
All right. Verse 19. If you're the sort of person that really loves fighting and discord, there's something wrong with you. There's something wrong with you. Inviting and provoking others to unnecessary conflict is the mark of a fool. I was a young man once. I'm a middle-aged man now. I was a young man once. And this, I think for a lot of us, again, this is very relevant to young men. We want to, I think we are geared to fight for something. But then when you don't have anything, you don't have your values straight, you don't have discipline where you can control yourself, you can't exercise dominion on yourself, what happens? Fights all the time, right? And you need to learn to channel that. You don't eliminate it, which is what some educational methods try to do, is try to eliminate it. That's not the proper response. However, you need to deal with the fact that if you love strife, you're being immoral. Strive for strife's sake. That's immoral. If you're the person that just loves to create a conflict that didn't need to be there, you're being evil. And then, okay, let's take it the next step. Are you the sort of person who's considered quarrelsome? Do you regularly invite division that didn't need to be there? Now, we live in a time where there's lots of things we do need to fight for, so I don't want to be suppressing that. However, there are people that just like to cause fights and cause people to fight amongst themselves, and it's wrong. And this doesn't have to be male. Gossip, slander, this happens a lot. Like really nasty things that people say to each other. That can manifest in both male and female ways. And it's a verbal version of, people slugging it out or hitting each other. And the principle's the same, even though the exercise is different. And so men and women alike can be the sort of person who like to create a fight that didn't need to be there. Why do we do that? Resentment. Good. Tell me more about resentment. So resentment in terms of your own resentment or other people's resentment?
It can be your own or others.
Right. I was thinking in terms of if I can't have it good, if I can't have had it good, you don't either. You don't get just to sit and relax and enjoy yourself because I don't, and so you don't get it either. So I'm going to deprive you of the peace and concord you might have. You need to be bothered like I am, and you need to be wounded and hurt like I am, and upset like I am. And you need to be just like me. I'm going to carve you just in my image. And I'm going to regret the goods that you have. So it's actually a form of covetousness. I envy the peace you have, and I don't like it. The other thing, what else might be at play?
Your own discontent.
Your own discontent and power. So similar with that, right? I'm just going to spread my mess everywhere. And power, Jeff, what do you mean power?
The ability to control others.
Yes. I did that. When people are all squabbling and arguing, I'm the agent of chaos. And there's an ego that gets fed. There's a pride. And that's dangerous. If you're the sort of person that's like, I did that, and maybe you're arguing with people, now they're paying attention to me. It's you see it in children, right? Sometimes if they want attention, they'll misbehave just because it's a way to get attention. And we have to communicate to our little ones, that's not the kind of attention you want to get for yourself. But a lot of people that thrive on strife, why do they want to do it? Well, now everybody's looking at me, or a lot of people are yelling at me, and I'm yelling at them, and they're yelling at each other, and I started it. The instigator, and it's a pride thing. It can be a covetousness thing, it can be a pride thing. And it can also be I need to exert my power in some way. There's that powerlessness feel. I don't feel agency, so I might as well throw a brick through a window, because I at least can do that. And that's especially what you find with young men. Young men that don't feel like they have any agency or any future will act out in these ways because at least I can accomplish this. So a feeling of accomplishment through discipline and other things, and a feeling of succeeding at something and having some sort of say in your destiny and future, I think is really important in the formation of young men. I think it's important for everybody. But I think young men, it gets very dangerous if that's not the case. And it was interesting. I was in kind of one of those think tanky group situations where I was talking about, and the girl who was leading the discussion said, think of a time in your adolescence or childhood where you feel agency. Because a lot of this function now is people feel no agency. They feel kind of helpless. So you throw a brick through a window, or you you just get addicted to something to numb yourself to the pain. And it was interesting the kind of things that came up, right? I landed my first three-pointer, or I shot that deer, or, for me, it was kind of, I didn't say it, but I was thinking, me and my brother would win every single Pinewood Derby. We switched first and second. And we were good at making Pinewood Derby cars. We were the best at it. And they kept trying to change the rules so that we would lose. And we kept beating them until I left the Cub Scouts, went on the Boy Scouts on the better things. And that felt good. And it felt like I could do that. I could do that. And every person kind of needs that in a healthy way. But in a bad way, they can be drawn to strife. I could do that. But that's not what you want to do. So if you're dealing with those sorts of maladies, you need to find a better outlet. And that's actually what Solomon's inviting his son to do. Young man, you could be fruitful. You can actually be a conciliator. You can be a peacemaker. You can be a leader. You can lead a project. You can lead a household. Think of all the fruitful things you can do if you're not wasting your time and energy picking a fight and ruining improving your record and your standing in the community? What happens when you're the sort of person who can build concord when it's necessary while also standing up for your principles when you need to? Guess what? You get in positions of leadership that way because people will find out. And if you're the person who always is starting to fight, guess what? Who's not going to be invited to be on the board or whatever, or the Kiwanis. You think of any sort of social unit and how it's like, well, maybe we have to hold our nose and bring him on, but otherwise, right? It's really interesting. The Bible is very aware of human society and how that functions. Does that make any sense? Like a sense? All right, so it's a moral problem if you have a draw to strife, unnecessary strife. And we live in a time that, strife sells. And so when the New Testament gives us guidance on how to reconcile with our friends and neighbors and our fellow Christians, we need to follow it. Any other thoughts or questions before we move on to verse 20?
Well, some people have been bullied, and then when they come out finally, it gets ugly.
Right, and it's kind of like, well, that's how you've had to survive in your home or wherever, or in the playground, is you've had to punch because you've been bullied all the time.
Or you've been suppressed so many years that finally punch you.
Finally, you're in a position of power, and it's scary when someone's under you or weaker than you. Finally, there's a target. And that's, you think about abuse and things, what's happening, spiritually, what's some of the things that could be going on. That could be one of them. I'm glad you noted that. Verse 20. What's verse 20 mean? Let me put it, go ahead, Lori.
Sometimes you run into people who always assume that others have an agenda or some sort of negative intention when it's just because that's what they are.
Mm.
You give them a gift, they want to know what you want.
Yeah.
They're just rejecting the evil that's in their own hearts.
Yes. I was going to put it this way, and I put it this way in the handout. What keeps you from finding goodness? You, oftentimes. It's one of those moments where Proverbs says, you can be your worst enemy. You have a froward heart, you can't find good, if you have a perverse tongue, you're going to fall into mischief. You're going to be your own worst enemy, because the way you speak, you're going to get yourself in trouble, because of what you do, what your heart wants and goes after. That's going to land you in trouble. You can be your own worst enemy.
The seed won't grow in your heart.
The seed won't grow in your heart. Good. There's the New Testament thing, isn't it? Good. Good. Any other thoughts or questions? Again, one of those points, we need to know this. Yes, there can be big, institutional, systematic things, and sometimes we can influence them, sometimes we can't. But what we can do is deal with this. Right? Your heart, including if you have a froward heart. 21. He that begetteth a fool doeth it to his sorrow, and the father of a fool hath no joy. There's two aspects, I think, to this. First, we want to be in honor and joy for our parents, and to be wise, to avoid foolishness, is a way to honor them. That's how you can honor. How do you want to honor your father and mother? How can you do right by them? Don't be foolish. Try to be wise. You want to do that, right? You love your mom and your dad? Sure. Okay. Conduct yourself with wisdom. The other thought is there can be a parental role in whether someone is foolish or wise. Those that parent foolishly will come to regret it. That's true too. And so it's also, so it's talking, if you're the child, if you're the son or the daughter, you're thinking about how can I honor my father and my mother? By being wise, by not being foolish. And then you think as a father or mother about the child, how do I bring misery upon myself if I inculcate foolishness and folly in the child? Do some people do that? Yes, unfortunately. Unfortunately. A lot of people can do that. And it depends on the time, the social place, the era, the household. But you can inculcate foolishness in a child just as much as you can have a role in inculcating wisdom in a child. And there's like it's a two-sided coin. And it should scare you as a parent in a good way. It should help scare you straight in terms of one of your tasks is to try as best you can to impute wisdom, to give and offer and try to instill and make beautiful and desirable and be an example of wisdom for a child. Yeah, Jeff, and then Mary Doug.
Father Mark, could it also imply that foolishness is a choice?
Oh, yeah.
People who choose to be foolish.
You don't do right by your parents. That's the child part. It's like, it's even that kind of idea of you know better. You were taught better kind of idea, but this idea of you know better, and you've chosen to carry on this way in such a way to really bring dishonor upon you, sadness, lack of joy to your father and mother. I want to make my mom happy. I don't know about you. And so I can choose to either be a fool, and that will bring her nothing but misery. And if you have someone who comes from maybe a foolish family or a family with a blind spot, you sometimes have to say no to what they're telling you, but hopefully you'll vindicate. The hope is to vindicate that in the end, and you'll be a blessing to them. There was a financial advisor I was listening to, I think I've shared this story before, where he came from a blue-collar background, and he had gone on to start his own company. And he's a multi-millionaire. He's you would know his name if I said it. And then he sold a book that's like a bestseller. He sold the 1,000th copy. And after his mom found out, she's like, well, when are you going to get a real job? It's like, what? He's like, for her, in her mind, real job means a wage for someone else. It means being an employee rather than employer. That's stability in her blue-collar America mindset. And that's, not quite right, is it? But the way he honors her, he didn't take her advice. He didn't take that worldview with him, but he's able to give blessing to her. I mean, think about it. She's going to be taken care of. And he wants to be that for her. He's just like, I just disagree. So I'm just trying to note an exception, maybe. Mary Doug?
Yeah, I think it's also possible that you have to impart wisdom to some children differently from one to the other because of personality.
Oh my gosh, and that's the art form, isn't it? That's the part that scares me about being a parent.
It requires humility.
It does require humility, and it requires an adaptability, and how do you inculcate them? I remember it was I had a colleague, one of his sons, he was able to teach him, here's another unofficial Gingrich principles, you must learn how to drive stick shift. You must. And so he had his one son, he just went next to him and was like, okay, put it in, put it out, don't, here's how to take your foot off the clutch, etc. And his firstborn son, they get along fine. The secondborn came along and they just ended up screaming at each other. Like, what are you doing? Ah! And so what's interesting, I think it was the mother was also involved. The father said, honey, I want you to take son number 2 to a parking lot. Just take a magazine, take your camping chair, sit down, and just let him fool with it for a while. Just let him do it by himself. Don't talk to him. Don't look at him. Just let him tootle around in an empty parking lot, and that's what did it. Now, that's small beans, right? It's how to drive a certain kind of car. But you can see how that similar difference in personality and skill set and whatever, you have to put that in the home. Because somehow you got to get... So there's that one child who has to learn by experience.
Yes.
And there's the one child that can watch the experience of the other child and get the fear of God stuck in them. And that was... I remember the time my brother made the mistake of lying to my father when he picked up a piece of candy from his bureau. So he's going to steal off his piece of candy, and he's like, Robert, did you steal that? No. He saw it happen, right? And so he's like, so you're going to lie to me, and you're going to do the thing I told you not to do. And what was interesting, it was a fireball.
Okay.
It's like, well, son, as a result of this, you can have the candy you stole. And that was the punishment. And there's my brother going, it's too hot. And then he let him spit it out. He wasn't torturing the child. But it was a lesson learned. And I'm watching. I was like right across the hall, and I'm watching this guy. It's going, it's so hot. It's a cinnamon candy. He'll be fine. He's fine. But I also learned a lesson too, and they were different. But the hope was to pass on wisdom and double dip, if you will. And those are good things.
He's going to steal, don't steal the firewood.
If you're, that was not the lesson that was supposed to be learned, was it? I will tell you, whenever I went to Bartley's Meat Market after that, I always looked at which tub is which. Because there's the jawbreakers and there's the fireballs. Anyway.
I like the version that's in our Bibles, which is he who begins a scoffer.
Yes, a scoffer.
And that
Scoffing
makes
is so
me
important to
think of
wisdom.
Kids who reject
Yes.
everything that you try to
Yes.
instill in that.
Right. And the difficult teenager who will scoff at all wisdom and knowledge, it's a pain. And if you have any role in instilling that, sometimes you do, sometimes you don't. That's difficult. And the good thing about someone who can, sometimes there's an unrealized gift or talent that's there, and sometimes there's not. You just have to pull it out. But other times it's a strong will that can actually be necessary for leadership in terms of a good constitution. Because they don't bow to what anybody else is saying. So you want to direct that towards the truth. Yeah. And that's hard. Parenting teenagers. It's always been hard. Said the guy who hasn't had a teenager yet. Verses 22 through 28. Let's see if we can finish the chapter. We might not.
A merry heart does good, like medicine, but a broken spirit dries the bones. A wicked man accepts a bribe behind the back to pervert the ways of justice. Wisdom is in the sight of him who has understanding. The eyes of a fool are on the ends of the earth. A foolish son is a grief to his father, and bitterness to her who bore him. Also, to punish the righteous is not good, nor to strike princes for their uprightness. He who has knowledge spares his words, and a man of understanding is of a calm spirit. Even a fool is counted wise when he holds his peace. When he shuts his lips, he is considered perceptive.
All right. Wonderful Proverbs. First of all, verse 22. Joy and brokenheartedness can color everything else. These things matter in terms of our life. And also how you approach people who may be joyful or brokenhearted. Read the room. You know, this is a how to conduct yourself sort of thing. All right? Any other questions or thoughts? Verse 23. Verse 23 seems tautological in the sense of this. Duh, of course, that's the definition. Right? Well, I knew that. Why does Solomon have to say it? Because it seems like a definition, right? It's defining itself. Of course, someone who takes a bribe is a crook. But crazy times and foolish people can pretend that bribe takers aren't wicked and they aren't grievously perverting the course of justice. This behavior does matter, and it will bring great misery upon a kingdom if it's indulged. Don't be a bribe taker, and don't wink at bribe taking. Right? This is a young prince, Solomon's son. Don't you wink at that? Don't you think you can leave it be if someone that's under your authority is taking bribes? That's no joke. That'll destroy a kingdom. And there are large groups of people who are otherwise skillful and knowledgeable, or at least powerful, who will pretend that it doesn't. Because they don't want to be troubled and bothered with addressing the problem. Because they're lazy and or cowardly. And so, Solomon's injunction, confront that. Make sense? Yeah. It's kind of like sometimes you just have to be the one pointing out the obvious thing. Because no one else wants to point it out. That's like half to 75% of what discernment means. Is pointing out the thing no one else has the moral fortitude to point out. That everybody else knows. It's the 800-pound gorilla in the room, but no one will do it. Because why? They're selfish. Verse 24. Verse 24. You have to pay attention. The eyes of the fool are on the ends of the earth. What does that mean? What do you think? What's the picture there? The eyes. The next great thing. I've been reading Little House on the Prairie, And Paul, for all his skills and abilities and goodness, his one weakness. Why are they always moving? Because his scheme didn't work out. Or he has a debt he's run up he can't pay, so they're headed out. That was Paul Engel's weakness. It's like, well, we went 3 miles into Indian territory. I thought they'd just, kick the Indians out, and they didn't, because they're actually going to abide by the treaty. Good! But we wanted to just move in here. No, sorry, Paul, hop in the trailer. That happens in the book. That's how the book ends. They have to leave the house. If you've read Little House on the Prairie, one of the things is they leave the little house. And they go to Plum Creek and the dugout. That's where we are now. But it's interesting, right? It's always the next thing. It reminds me of Tenderfeet or Weebloos when they go to summer camp for the first time. They've ever actually hit a real trail. What's going to happen? There's going to be a tree root, or there's going to be a rock or a boulder, and skin knees, busted toe boxes, and lips, and what happened? We weren't paying attention. Were you? Great. This is what a fool's like. He's got his head, and not in the sense of wonder, but in the sense of not paying attention. Because paying attention forces you have to look outside yourself and stop looking and hearing what you think matters, what you want to be, and start thinking about there are others out there. So it's the path to maturity, right? As a child, everything's about me and my needs, and I'm the center of the universe. And then as you grow, the painful thing about maturity is there are others out here. And it's not about you all the time. And that's at the heart of, I think, my teenage inattentiveness is I don't think about others in the world. And that will hurt you in your marriage, that will hurt you in your relationships and friendships. You don't think about them. You're only thinking about what's in your head. You might not even think about yourself like a nasty, I'm just thinking of me, but think of, you start getting an instinct as a husband. What will she think when I do that? What will that mean for her, for me to put my shoes here, or not clean this up, or men do this, so they start getting really set into a marriage. Well, she's not going to like that. I need to talk to her about this. Why do they do that? Because they've matured. It's probably been a painful process. Not always. Maybe some of you guys are geniuses in that way. But I think, at least for me, it's a learned skill. It's a learned wisdom. And females, wives as well. There's a male and female part to this, right? But we all need to start thinking about others. When children come along, they force you to think about them. And it's hard. And it forces you to be wiser against your own desire. Which is why the theologians would call marriage and family a school of virtue. Why? Because it forces you to behave. Because you've got people depending on you now. Good things, good things. Verse 25 is kind of a repeat of what we've already covered about parents. Verse 26, don't punish virtue. Don't punish virtue. Right? No deed goes unpunished. No good deed goes unpunished. You don't want that to be the case. You want to honor, celebrate, recognize, and certainly not penalize people that do the right thing. Especially if you're thinking in terms of the leadership of the kingdom. Right? Who should get the promotion? Right? Who should get the promotion? Who should be, in terms of a military rank, in terms of a company, in terms of a cabinet? You want to reward virtue, you want to honor it. Don't be surprised that you'll lack virtue in yourself or the people you need when you need it if you shame and suppress it all the time. So there's a lot of funny memes going around now of all of a sudden people groups that have been popularly villainized in our culture and society, suddenly we need them to protect us. Right? And it's like, it's going to be interesting. It's like, well, you need to change how you talk about people then. Because otherwise they're just going to resign, say, nope, you take care of it yourself. So you're not going to honor and respect and hold some values in common here. No, especially not for low pay. That's what's interesting, right? One of the things is you can have people take a low-paying job if you give them a lot of honor and respect as a society. That can be a trade-off that people will take. Well, I might not get paid a lot, but people here love me, respect me, and show me some appreciation. And if you don't do that, you either have to turn up the wages, and even then, they're doing it not out of love and loyalty, so if somebody can pay a higher price, they're not going to be loyal. This is Machiavelli and mercenaries, right? When he's talking about soldiers. You should have soldiers that love their country. You shouldn't just have people for hire, contracted for hire. It makes all the difference. And this isn't just a military thing. This is a whole culture, social thing. Like how we hold together, what do we value, how do we show appreciation. And you can't be villainizing all these people and say, well, now we need you to do the hard work. We need you to do all the dirty jobs now.
And the dirty jobs guy is showing how honorable and valuable.
Speaking of micro, I love micro. Yeah, he's showing that it's a good thing and that you need to keep it together. They're going to be the ones running the show. Why do they run the show? Because they actually run the show. They put in the work to do it and put the skin in the game, and you should appreciate people like that. And it's also, other values and silly ideologies that are foolish and easy to do when times are easy and prosperous. So you think of some of the ideologies now, and there's a lot of stuff going around that people are realizing how foolish popular things were. So hopefully we'll be awakened to that. But don't punish virtue. Don't suppress heroism. What's often at play when we suppress heroism? Covetousness. Well, people are acting like he's better than me, so I'm going to attack him to tear him down a few notches. Why? Because I'm jealous of him. And it's also an ignorance of how the real world operates, including how difficult it is to do the right thing at the right time. Clint Eastwood, 2 of his recent movies have really zeroed in on this aspect of our culture. Sully, and who's the guy who found the bomb? He found some sort of bomb, and he saved the day, and then he gets accused of being the one that planted it.
Oh, yeah.
Atlanta, yeah. And both of them, it's a PR circus. And both of them, it's like, first of all, especially with the bomb one, it's like they have no idea. Oh, no, the Sully one. He's landing a plane that's broken. And he's like, well, did he really do the right thing? And Lance's like, it's a bunch of Monday morning quarterbacking, right? And we do this. Why? Because we're deeply ignorant of how the real world operates and how difficult it is to know, well, what am I doing now? I'm in a major metropolitan area with a giant jumbo jet with people filled up with people. And you should probably honor and, that's what most people naturally did. But then there's a group of people that are ignorant of their ignorance. Right? They're ignorant. It's the provocateurs. Look, I can make money this way. And then there are people that covet. And so both of those, that really brings harm to a kingdom. Does it not? It's a problem because you need Sullys. You should celebrate Sully, right? And that's what Clint Eastwood's inviting us to do. He's using his art to draw that out, give us some wisdom. Hooray, we need those kinds of people. And you should, young man, young woman, you can be that kind of person. And then there's also party line, just so popular folly narratives that can also really hurt you. Right? There's a lot of toxic things that aren't really toxic at all, and we need to watch out for them. Finally, verses 27 through 28, what are wise people like? Quiet. How can we compensate for our own foolishness and ignorance? By silence.
It is better to be thought of as a fool than open your mouth.
And confirm it. Is that George Washington? Is that or Ben Franklin? It's just one of those.
Twain?
Twain? Was it Twain? Open your mouth and remove all doubt. Love it. And this is true. If you know you're a fool and dislike that fact, you're already on the path to wisdom. If you know you're a fool and act like, okay, I'm a fool, so I better not open my mouth. And that becomes a habit, and you actually can grow in wisdom. That's the trajectory towards wisdom. It's like, why are wise people quiet all the time? Because they started practicing this. Wonderful.
This is sort of like self-awareness.
Self-awareness. So instead of having your head up in the clouds, always on the horizon, there's a healthy awareness of self. It's like, listen, look where your elbows and arms are going. I remember, I'm so clumsy, right? I'm slew-footed when I was a kid, and I was growing big, and half of my childhood was spent with stubbed toes. I mean, just... And you have to learn as a young man, where are my elbows at? Where are my knees at? Where are my hands and my toes and my arms? And it wasn't there earlier. A year ago, it used to go that far, right? That's, my arm got longer. My feet, where are they? It's an odd thing doing growth spurts. And it's like that. You have to start becoming aware of yourself in a good way. And then when you're aware of yourself, your own failings, how you can panic in a bad situation, you will appreciate people that keep their head in a bad situation. One time, it was unpleasant, I saw people shooting at each other in my parking lot before we moved. And it was a bad situation. I was on the phone, 911. It's like, what does he look like? What, sir? What's he doing? Oh, he's shooting at the guy. I mean, I was just like, the adrenaline was going. I was very unhelpful to the police. Then eventually I kind of got a few things. His jacket's this color, the car's this color. I can't see the license plate. Sorry. But, you just, when in that moment, when you're in the moment and you're not trained for it. Right? That's what I loved about the Scouts. You're always doing emergency preparedness. So even when all of your adrenaline's pumping, you robotically go through the drill. You robotically tie the knots. You robotically put on the bandage, put on the pressure, because you're over and over, every scout meeting, you're doing this as a drill. Because that can compensate for the panic. But when you're in the situation, there's no training for it, like a jet engine goes out here over the Hudson, that's when really amazing people can step up to the plate. And you might not. And you've got to learn to respect that. That's where you respect people. So a self-awareness. That's what I'm getting at, self-awareness. There's a good self-awareness. Any other thoughts or questions?
I think we all have an emotional space we need to be aware of.
Yeah.
And when you're not, that's when you stop your child.
Or someone else's.
Yeah.
Stuff someone else's toe.
Yeah.
And why are they so mad at me? Because the joy or the heartbreak that you jumped in on. All right, let's pray. Father, we thank you for the wisdom of your word. Yes, that we would grow in wisdom together as your children. In Christ's name, amen.